Welcome to the briefing note. I'm your host, Sarah Elder, and I'm so excited for the conversation that I am about to have. Well, have already been having with Catherine Tsalikis. And she is the author of the book Chrystia, which talk about timing. It would have been an amazing book anyways, Catherine, just because of how good it is and how the insight that it provides into Chrystia Freeland. But obviously, given the political goings on currently in Canadian politics, it's like, Christmas for politicos.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here with you. I still haven't wrapped my head around it, so I'm with you. It's nothing of my own doing, I have to say. It just happened to be very good timing. But yeah, it's as I said before, it's hard to get any sort of attention on Canadian nonfiction, and so I'm grateful for any boost I'll take.
Well, I mean, I can agree. As someone who built a store around advocating for the increased participation of women in Canadian politics, I mean, I think we're kindred spirits. And then, getting attention, and as someone who sells books and looks for books on women and Canadian women in Canadian politics, I told you before we started recording that I had seen this book because its original release date was in 2025, either February or March, I want to say.
February,
and
yes.
So I had favorited it and was going to circle back in January and be like, oh, you order this for when it comes out. And then everything that, has happened. And I saw a tweet that said, oh, this book is coming. This book, Chrystia, is being rushed to print. And it's going to be released. And I was like, it's one of those times in your life where you're like, you have to add to cart immediately. That was this.
Just the nicest endorsement. I can't even. Yes, again, it was, I learned a lot about the behind the scenes of publishing, I think, in the last few weeks. Also, my publisher who was able to move mountains to get this into stores. I'm so glad it's in yours. I feel like
yes,
we need exactly more spaces in which to talk about women in politics and everything that involves.
Yeah.
There's not enough stories about women in politics. So
100%. And I mean, I've had people come into the store and say like, oh, it seems like there are a lot of books about American women in politics. And my response is yes, because that's what's available. If you would like to see more books about Canadian women in Canadian politics or Canadian society, you need to buy what's available on the market so that the publishers understand that there is a demand, because this is, they're not going to, they want to make money, right? And so people have to buy them. And then, but also on the flip side to that, when these books do come out and you do see them in stores, buy them. Don't choose the other book, or buy both. Actually, that would be the ideal.
Can I tell you something? So I have been saying this in other interviews, and I've been saying I'm happy to be proved wrong. I haven't been, but I believe that this is the only book that we have by a Canadian female journalist about a Canadian female politician. I could not find something similar to what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Compare it to. The ones that I read while I was, starting to look into doing this project were books about Nancy Pelosi in the States. I say, hey, she's not the leader, but she's up there, and be interested in that. Angela Merkel, the former chancellor of Germany.
I have her new book in the store.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So before her memoir, there was a biography.
Yeah, I had that one too.
Yeah, which I thought was wonderful. But I couldn't find the equivalent here. And
I mean, just from looking at it, so I think you're right, because I do have other books about women in Canadian politics, because I have Women Winning Office by Peggy Nash, the former NDP MP. I have 2 books by Kate Graham, who did the podcast No Second Chances. So I have the adult version of her book, and then I have the kids version, which is called Govern Like a Girl.
The kids version. Okay,
yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
And then I have books on, I'm just looking, I have Jen Psaki, I have Amy Klobuchar, I have I have books about women from Ireland. Like I have a lot of I spend a lot of time trying to curate and find the best books about women in politics from around the world. Um, and I wish it was easier.
Yeah.
And I wish that more people read them.
Yeah, that's it too, right? There has to be people writing the stories, but there also has to be the appetite for them.
Exactly. There has to be the demand. And so I want
yeah,
Canadians to create the demand. And so maybe your book is, actually helps other books come after yours.
I've been heartened to see that the fact that there is interest in, a, a Canadian. There's not that many of them. There's not that many women who reach to the heights that Chrystia has, and that was
Yeah.
part of why I wanted to do it, to figure out how the heck she managed to do that while being a mother of three kids in a country where it just doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have. So I this has heartened me for
Oh,
sure.
good. Well, and I feel like I'm in my head right now. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, the clock is already ticking, and there's so much I want to. But it's just so easy to talk to you. And
to come back next.
Yes, like honestly, I feel like we could talk for hours, but obviously the people's appetite for that is maybe not the same as mine. So, um, maybe let me ask, like, so is this unauthorized or unauthorized? Because it's by you about her,
That's right.
and
So
you
yeah.
don't actually talk. She's not quoted directly in the book. So is tell me about that.
This is right. So I feel like so it is an unauthorized biography. I feel like that makes it sound so much more salacious than it actually is. All it means is that the subject has no editorial control in your project.
Okay.
So there have been recent biographies about Justin Trudeau where he has sat down with the author and given them some time. But those were still unauthorized because obviously Justin Trudeau wasn't there saying, like, hey, use this quote or you can't use this or not. So with Chrystia, no, when I first started this project, I did want to speak with her. I didn't know how you would go about putting together a portrait of someone's life without speaking with the subject. It seemed very daunting to me. So I reached out to her office and they kind of waffled. They didn't give me a yes or a no. So I was like, okay, I'll just start reaching out to some people and see where I get.
Yeah.
That's what I did for months. I just kind of started with, people I knew were close colleagues or friends. I started getting yeses, and the more people I talked to, I feel like that opened doors to others who were even closer to her. Eventually, I sat down with her sister in New York. I went to go visit her aunt, who is in Edmonton. I went up to Peace River, where she grew up, about 5 hours north of Edmonton. But throughout it all, no, I never actually, I never got an official no, but I finally made my peace with the fact that I wasn't going to speak with her, but that actually was probably best for what I was trying to do. A lot of her former colleagues are journalists because she worked as a journalist for 20 years. And quite a few of them told me that the second you sit down with her, it becomes a different book. Inevitably kind of have like a sympathy there. I don't know. I don't know if that would be the case, but I was okay with it. I thought better to build a portrait of her through a lens of people who know her and have worked with her and have seen her at various points in her life, and then leave it to the reader to decide what they make of this woman.
And just as a note, because when you do read for those and I hope everyone reads it. And I asked you this before, you said you finished writing it about a year ago.
Yeah. So
which is important for people to keep in mind in this conversation, because I can't ask you what did you write about what happened last Monday, right?
So yes. So the book went to the printers. I think it was October of 2024, so a couple months ago.
Yeah.
But before that, I was in the editing process. But yeah, I wasn't really able to change much past, say, last summer. I finished the whole manuscript maybe last winter, but then there was some editing. But no. So once we shipped it off, I knew that was it. And also that anything could happen. Politics is just a tricky business. And I knew going in, I knew that if you're going to write about a political subject, that there's a chance that she may be gone, in a week or whatnot.
Right.
There have been so many cabinet ministers in the Trudeau government that have just, spectacularly flamed out or fallen by the wayside or been cast aside. So I knew that was a risk, but I thought that her story was worth telling anyway. And that was what I was, and my publisher as well. The reason I I think I jive so well with House of Anansi. They told me, we need more stories about women in public life. It doesn't matter to us whether or not she goes on to become prime minister. We just think that her story is worth telling by itself. So I was okay. I kind of, again, made my peace with that, and said, let's leave it as open-ended as possible. The conclusion kind of nods to the dire polling numbers of the Liberals, and that Justin Trudeau at the time was really hanging on, saying, I'm not going anywhere. It looked like he was going to, kicking and screaming, contest the next election. And so I left it as, you know what, we'll see. I have a quote in there by former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, who I spoke to before he passed away. He said, whatever she does next, it'll be something worth watching. She's a woman of substance. So that kind of made me feel better about leaving it open-ended. Whatever she does, it'll be something worth talking about. And here we are.
Here we are. And I told you I have a lot of, so I was like, oh my gosh, I have too much to talk to you about for this podcast episode, but I will try to get through as much as possible. Okay. So maybe in the book, and I'll cite the pages for anyone, because I'm sure that, there are people who maybe will hopefully follow along and go and look at the book and pick up some of the things that I want to talk about. On page 6, you write, it's a glib, so in reference to something else there, you share an anecdote, and it says, it's a glib anecdote, perhaps, but it serves as a vivid demonstration of something that has become obvious to both colleagues and political observers over nearly a decade. In the Trudeau government, some things just would not happen without Chrystia Freeland. And in the context now, right? Oh my gosh.
That I was struggling with how to open the book. And someone had told me this anecdote about Chrystia being with various members of the government and the prime minister on this overnight train ride to Kyiv, in a war zone. The situation is fraught, everybody's tense and exhausted, and they just said, man, I wish I could have a glass of wine or something like that. But they were told there's no alcohol aboard this train, and Chrystia, speaking Ukrainian, and with her capacity to make friends with really anyone who she puts her mind to, she befriended the train attendants who said, one of them, well, hey, I have a bottle of bourbon here, and she procured the alcohol. So yes, it is glib, but I thought that was a perfect demonstration of what came before that over her nearly a decade with this.
Yeah. But that to me is just prescient, because some things would just not happen without Chrystia Freeland. Now, in the context of Justin Trudeau would not have resigned if Chrystia Freeland had not resigned herself.
It's quite poetic. I did not see it would end this way, but I'm not surprised. Now, with the benefit of a couple of weeks of hindsight, yes. I was as shocked as anybody else, don't get me wrong, but it makes sense that she would be the one to make things happen, because that's what she has done throughout this entire government, is make things happen. And I have a story in there about her time negotiating a free trade agreement between Canada and the European Union. They had reached kind of a sticky impasse with the small Wallonian region in Belgium. And her partner in trade, or her chief negotiator, said to her, hey, I think you should do something dramatic to move these talks along. I think you should take a walk out. And she did. And he said to me, she was a fairly new minister then, she didn't know how this would go over with the public or with the prime minister's office, who didn't know about it. But she did it anyway. And she said she was prepared to make bold moves, which was very rare for a new minister. And I think you see that throughout her ministerial career.
Well, and throughout the book, that's very clearly demonstrated time and time again, is that she does make bold moves. She is a bold mover. And even on page 35, I highlighted this section that you write, as a Canadian cabinet minister, Chrystia would become known for taking quick, decisive action when she believed it was the right thing to do, even if that led to adverse consequences for her government. Again, right?
Or herself.
Yes.
Right. I think I have
bold moves. She's willing to make bold moves.
And it's interesting because I think Justin Trudeau and his PMO have become known for centralizing power even more perhaps than we saw in past governments, thinking Stephen Harper. But she was always managed, she always found a way to get her stuff done. And I think it's funny, it comes from, her parents. She's very much a product of of both of her.
Mm.
Her mother, a very brilliant, trailblazing, hardworking lawyer, feminist. Her father, more of a, I have a quote in there, screw convention type, Western Albertan, like grew up on a farm. Didn't like we got into some fisticuffs over unpaid parking tickets. So I think that you see her father in that, within the parameters of, I have in there the moral compass of her mother. But no, she's not willing to make waves. But she's also strategic. She thinks about things. She doesn't fly off the handle. So I think with her resignation, that would have been, it's not a knee-jerk reaction to
Mm.
emotional reaction to what Trudeau had done, which was basically offer her a demotion.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. So she would have thought that through, and I think would have known that things would play out this way. But
Yeah.
she did it anyway.
Well, and I mean, maybe that's, I mean, I feel like I'm picking up a theme now on the things that I picked out from the book. Because fast forwarding to page, I think 49, where you talk to a person named Lucan Way.
So that's one of her best friends from her undergrad at Harvard.
Right. And you quote him as saying, quote, she was like, I'm going to do it all, remembers Way. Everybody kind of knew at that time she was destined for greatness. She would joke that she didn't want to be foreign minister of Canada because Canada is too small for her. If that had come from anybody else, it would have seemed ridiculous, he says. But her, like, of course.
Yeah. And that was just the sense I got across the board talking to people. Like so many people I talked to for this book, we would start the interview and they said, oh, okay, so you're doing a book about the next Prime Minister of Canada. It was just kind of taken as given. And this is all the way up to world leaders. People like her counterparts in the NAFTA negotiations, both on the US side and the Mexican side, both of them said to me, I would not be surprised to see her as leader of your country in the future. But no, from the very beginning, she had big designs. She had big ambitions. She wanted to be in the room where things happen. This is kind of a thing I pick out over the course of the book. But even at Harvard, friends said, there were a lot of women. There were a lot of her fellow students who were very vocal about what they wanted to accomplish in their professional lives, in their careers. But it was more rare to hear someone talk about how much they wanted to do something great career-wise, but also have a family. And Chrystia was always determined to have a family. She has 3 kids. She saw how hard it was for her mother as a single mom of 2, working. Chrystia and her sister, their mother subscribed to the theory of benign neglect. So from a very young age, Chrystia would take her sister home after school, give her a snack. They would fly to Peace River by themselves as children. She had to be responsible, quick, because that was the only way her mom could kind of be able to do her job. But no, she saw that and she said, she saw how hard that was. And she said, I still want that. And I'm going to make it happen. And to her credit, she did. And so you see that in the way she conducted herself as a cabinet minister. She hosts, everything takes place at her home, right? She entertains at home. She brings foreign dignitaries. She brings public intellectuals. She hosts them for barbecues in her backyard and in her townhouse in Summerhill here in Toronto. And she cooks the waffles, and her kids are there, always doing something impressive, reading the biographies of U.S. presidents or playing musical instruments, speaking Ukrainian. This I thought was a very different way of doing politics, and I don't know if it's transferable across the board because someone made the point to me, she's in Toronto, right? It's not like she's
right. She's not in BC.
Exactly.
She's right. The distance, the commute is much shorter.
So it's not tenable for everyone to do that, but it is, I think I am told people found it charming, right? To be brought into her world a little bit, to be brought into her orbit, in a way that you don't see very often, right? Her house is messy too, right? And she doesn't care. That's one of the things that she has decided she's not even going to pay lip service to. That doesn't matter. It's not possible to do the kind of things that she does and have the kind of responsibility that she did by worrying about that kind of stuff. So that was an interesting glimpse too into how she kind of divides her time and her priorities. and
Well,
not.
and that's everything that I want for women to have in politics, right? Is to do things on their own terms, right? And to be able to do that and to really change the game. And she does. She's a game changer. I'm going to jump ahead in the book and talk about, because I personally find this chapter of her life so fascinating, is when she was in Ukraine as a student. And what page? Oh, I can't. Oh, around page 60. Because I don't think enough people know about this chapter of her life and how much of a fucking, I'm going to say fucking badass she
Yeah,
was. And
yeah.
obviously that doesn't die in you, right? And I feel like this, I really find this part so interesting. So you write, on campus, following the delivery of her speech that she had given, handsome Russian men had started appearing at the door of her dormitory. They would strike up a conversation and then quiz her about certain Ukrainian nationalists and Western technology. Soon, Soviet authorities began calling her, requesting that she meet with them. She refused. Displeased, the Soviets sent a telegram to the Canadian embassy in Moscow on April 21st, chiding, "Your national is a well-known troublemaker and you should keep better control over your citizens."
What a badge of honor, right?
Total badge of honor. Total badge of honor.
I had found a report. I think it was the Edmonton Journal. I could be wrong, but it was
Okay, yes.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
you go on. Okay, I'll keep reading. I'll
Yeah,
keep reading your words, which
perfect.
must be a little bit weird for you. You go on to write, news of Chrystia's adventures made it all the way back to her home province of Alberta. Quote, "City woman in USSR tells KGB to get lost," read an April 28th headline in the Edmonton Journal. It included an interview with Chrystia's mother. Quote, "Am I proud?" Is her mom's name Helena?
Yeah.
Helena asked. "You bet."
What?
And then you go on, even it gets better. In Kyiv too, Chrystia made headlines. Pravda Ukraini, the official daily newspaper of the Ukrainian Communist Party, dedicated nearly 2,000 words to her, quote, "abuse of hospitality." And this was before the wall had fallen, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, like she was doing covert and overt, you know, espionage. Like,
The line is fuzzy. We're not.
yes.
I wasn't able to uncover overt espionage. But yeah, I have another anecdote there of a pro Ukraine democracy group that gave her kind of clandestine materials that she, with no compunction, just carried over the border to bring them back. I think it was from London back into Ukraine via Moscow. And she didn't bat an eye. Right. This is at a time where people were stopped at the Moscow airport, taken to the side, searched. Who knows, what could happen to you after.
Yeah.
Same with a group of photographers in Ukraine that she came to befriend, who were documenting everyday life in Ukraine, which then was still kind of, avant-garde at the time. She kind of brought those photos back to a UK newspaper so that they could be widely seen in the West and have a bigger audience. She was young. She was 20 at the time, I believe. So, and that's just the thing that you see throughout her life, right? And so and it kind of culminates with her going up against Vladimir Putin, when he announces
and Donald Trump.
And Donald Trump, yeah. Well,
right?
Yeah.
So many. Yeah, she like challenges authority, right? And that's a reoccurring theme. Like bold moves, challenges authority, says what others are thinking, but won't say themselves.
Exactly. And not in a petulant way, but because she said it's the right thing.
Yeah, it's from a place of like
principle
and values. And I really admire that. And okay, we're running out of time, but I really want to get into the more current times. So I really thought it was interesting in the book around, it's I think page 160, right? Katie Telford. We're now in the times of like trying to get Chrystia Freeland to run. And you write that Telford had seen Chrystia Freeland speak at a BAM Center event. And she turns to her husband, who I guess was sitting beside her, and she said to Gerald, not her husband's not Jerry Butts, but Jerry Butts is in the realm of, to be honest, I kind of think of the three of them as married in some ways. Like best friends, like really, really connected. Like I could only hope in life to have best friends like Justin Trudeau, Gerald Butts, and Katie Telford.
Yeah,
anyways,
to go through life like that. I know.
Yes, exactly. But so Katie turns to her husband and said, after hearing Chrystia speak, it's women like that we need in politics. Right. And now Katie Telford is still Justin Trudeau's press secretary and, has now been with him, and now he's resigning. And it's just also so interesting, and how their recruitment effort of her. And I thought it was really interesting that you shared the anecdote about the three of them, Trudeau, Telford, and Butts, talking about getting her to run. And so in the book it says, so they're talking about it, and afterwards Trudeau, Telford, and Butts piled into the car that would drive them to their next event. Quote, her dad said maybe she would run, Telford said. Trudeau looked at her and responded, that would be great. You should make that a project for us.
And she did. Right?
And she did. And she did end up running. Right. And fast forward, I thought it was, and maybe so much good material, so little time. I thought it was really interesting that the legitimacy that she lent to him, right?
Yeah.
So the gravitas that she had, she really extended that to him throughout her, and not only when she ran, but she gave that to him.
From the beginning, she was held up as a star candidate, right? She had an incredible track record as a journalist in the United States, one of Manhattan's top business journalists. Her second book, Plutocrats, what formed a basis of a large part of the Liberals' campaign manual. They kind of adopted that. I'm thinking of the middle class, the middle class and those working hard to join it. That was, those ideas were kind of found their roots in her book. And yeah, it's poignant. They personally brought her in. So it went both ways, right? She believed in his values.
Mm-hmm.
He convinced her that he understood what it would be like to be a working mother and an MP. He understood her hesitations on that side of things. So he did personally convince her. And the relationship went both ways, right? I at the beginning of this project, I was so fascinated by her rise, right? Her star just kept rising with Trudeau, when, as I said, so many ministers have had to kind of step aside, or she just kept rising. And I think that was because she made herself beneficial to him. Like it went both ways. Like she rose because he allowed her to do so, but she delivered for him. She, time after time, whether it was the NAFTA negotiations during the first Trump presidency, or the economic, when we were facing economic catastrophe after the COVID pandemic, or the war in Ukraine, so many times he has parachuted her into positions where she would have to take on the government's trickiest file. And she delivered for him. And so, yeah, and I thought it was, after the Toronto St. Paul by-election, Chrystia's former chief of staff, Leslie Church, lost for the Liberals, which was a disaster for them. And then you started hearing these leaks of, Katie Telford and the PMO aren't pleased by Chrystia's, the way she's selling the government's economic message. And I feel like that had to have hurt, because I don't know if that, I have no insight whether those were accurate or not. But I don't think it was lost on Chrystia that not once in the following months did Trudeau give a full-throated defense of his finance minister, right? He never, and he was asked, but he didn't stand up and say, no, she's going to be with me for the long term, or, I have full confidence in her and she's staying. yeah, so I feel like with this drip of leaks, and then they were increasingly at odds over policy, and with this final, demotion, informing her that she moved out of finance and given a portfolio with no resources or ministry attached to it. Yeah, it's not a like it's an unceremonious way for the relationship to end.
Yeah. Well, and it
But
was interesting, because he was asked when he resigned on Monday, Trudeau, like to finally comment because he hadn't said anything for 3 weeks.
yeah,
And, he really tied her to his record. And, in some ways, it'll be interesting to see, if she does run for the leadership to replace him. That reporters will obviously ask them, but like, well, Justin Trudeau said himself, you're so, you were with him every step of the way. How are you going to be any different? Are you just going to be, Trudeau 2.0?
I
Um,
yeah, I spoke with Chris Alexander, the former Stephen Harper cabinet minister, a couple of years. I want to say maybe it was 2022, and he said at the time he was the first one to kind of really speculate on her future. Because I had been talking to more, colleagues about her journalism years or her childhood or whatever.
right.
And he said to me, but there's no way she can separate herself from Justin Trudeau. And since then, exactly that's all I could think about, really. That was as I got into the government years, that was the picture that people painted of me or painted to me. There was no light between them on policy. So many of one of her former like a former advisor said to me, like, so many of Justin Trudeau's policies were Chrystia Freeland's policies.
Mm,
I know that in finance, she did try and take a more, quote, fiscally responsible view of how the government should conduct its economic affairs, as did Morneau, and we saw how that ended. So I don't know. I think the way in which she resigned perhaps creates some distance in the mind, like a superficial distance in the minds
yeah,
of the public. Whether that will be enough, I'm not sure.
we'll have to see.
I don't know.
Well, and so, I mean, we're going to wrap things up, but I mean, I think the way that you left the book was, in the best way possible. You write about, so you end the book actually with quotes from Mulrooney, you said before he passed away. And so the last paragraph in the book is, quote, what Chrystia does next is anyone's guess, but there's little doubt that it'll be something worth watching. We're dealing with a woman of substance here, Mulrooney said. She's going to be a big player no matter what.
It was the perfect way to sum up.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to tell. Even now, who knows? Who knows what she's going to do? I could see her going either way, right? I'm saying, okay, yeah, this is my shot. I'm gonna go for it, or saying, no, this is not for me right now. But whatever it is, she'll think it through carefully and strategically, as she always does. And it won't be like she put it in that letter to supporters after her resignation. This will not be the end of the road. So we'll just have to. I have another quote in there by Amanda Alvaro, who a liberal communication strategist who worked with her early on in her first by-election campaign, and she said sometimes all you can do is like just watch her, watch her go, and that's what we'll have to do.
Yeah. Well, and we're all going to watch you, the author of a book, the new book, Chrystia, and myself as a, avid political follower, and everyone listening to this, we do get to watch. And I'm excited to see what happens. So thank you so much for speaking with me. I can't wait for part 2.
TBD. Like there'll be lots of media material there. No, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate the space. It's like I say, I really believe it's important to tell these stories about these women. So I'm glad you're doing that, and you're allowing me a little bit of space to do that with you. So
well, no, I mean, this is how we change things, right? Is just maybe doing things that haven't been done before. So we just need to keep on doing those things.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Sarah.